All right, you are
Great.
good to go.
Awesome. And Jeanette, would you mind sharing your screen on the agenda?
Of course.
I think you have better ease of flipping between documents. So thank you, everybody. We will call the Regional Wastewater Reclamation Advisory Committee meeting, the RWRAC's Financial Subcommittee meeting for January 12th to order. And we will start by doing a roll call of our members. So Jeanette, will you help us with that?
All right. Asia Philbin.
Here.
Matt Matthewson. I did not see him on.
I think he's
Eric,
on. Is he MM? Oh, no, sorry. That's Michelle. Sorry, go ahead.
I do not see him on.
Nope.
Eric Sulwald. Eric, that's you. I see you. Okay. Kirsten Wangsvik.
Here.
And Claire Zucker, who is having computer issues and will join us as soon as she can. We do have a quorum.
Awesome. All right, well then we'll begin by doing the virtual meeting reminders that help facilitate a well-ordered virtual meeting. And these guidelines are addressed at the beginning of the meeting for any members of the public as well that may join. Please mute your microphones to ensure we do not have any feedback or other background noises to interfere with whoever is speaking. If a committee member would like to ask a question, please raise your hand. Please remember to lower your hand once your question has been addressed. When you're ready to speak, remember to unmute your microphone, especially during votes, and don't forget to remute yourself when you are finished speaking. And as a reminder, audience members are only permitted to speak during the call to the audience unless otherwise called upon by the committee. And this meeting is being recorded to satisfy our open meeting law requirements. So with that, we will do the Pledge of Allegiance. All right. So I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States
of America.
And to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I started to try and harmonize with you, Kirsten, but I forgot
couldn't hear
that doesn't
anybody.
work very well.
I don't know if the two-way transmittal doesn't work on these virtual meetings. It's all right, whatever it was. Okay, so now we will do a call to the audience. If there are any, here comes Claire. If there are any audience members that wish to address the Financial Subcommittee, now is the time. I don't know if we have any audience members. Hearing none, let's move on to a safety share, and we are hoping Jackson has a good one.
Well, I started again, because we finally got some cold temperatures and we're seeing some frost and even a little bit of freezing temperatures. We did our slips, trips, and falls, ice that forms around anywhere that moisture or water was, and with the rains and stuff, it was just kind of crazy. And I thought, boy, it sure felt cold this morning, but it wasn't quite in the 32 or less degrees, but with the breeze blowing, it might have formed some ice somewhere. So we're still just using slips, trips, and falls in this cold weather. And then a second one, or a piggyback on that, is we're quickly moving into Gem and Mineral Show. And, by the end of February, we got rodeo. So tremendous amount of tourists and visitors to the community, and traffic gets real crazy in January and February. So be very careful and do your defensive driving and avoid the busy parts of the community if you can. So those are my safety shares.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Yeah. And with the cold and the ice, out where I live in the Tanque Verde Valley, we had those 35 to 55 mile an hour. So anybody, I think that was close to the mountains, probably was dealing with that. And boy, that wind was majorly cold at times this weekend. So perfect. Well, then let's move towards the approval of the minutes. Did everybody have a chance to read through the minutes? I did not find anything as far as corrections or objections myself. Did anybody have anything that they want to let Jeanette know about before we move to adopt?
I move that we adopt the minutes from the December meeting.
Second.
All right, then all in favor of adopting the minutes, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All right, meetings have been approved and adopted. So with that, let's just move right into our agenda first item, which is the rate workbook spreadsheet review that Art was going to walk us through. Hi, Claire.
Good morning, everyone. Hope your weekends went well. I'm actually going to turn this over to Michelle. I think she's got the document that she's going to share. There was a job aid, I believe, that was put out as well. I don't know the date of that job aid, but Michelle will go through both of those documents for the committee today. Thanks. Michelle, ready?
Yep. So good morning, everyone. Thank you. What I did is, and included in your packet was a job aid that we put together several years ago to kind of help the committee understand when we're talking about the rate workbook or we're referencing the rate workbook, what it is we're talking about. And so I had asked Jeanette to send that back out to everybody just as a refresher. So what I thought I would do is bring up the rate workbook that was part of the fiscal year 25 financial plan and kind of walk through that with putting the two together, right? This is the rate workbook that's up on your screen, and then you have the job aid. So basically, if you have questions while I'm talking, please just jump in, ask your questions. I'm not someone who can easily watch for hands at the same time they're, chatting. So please don't please don't hesitate to jump in if you have any questions. So as you've seen before, up on your screen right now is the rate workbook. Is that big enough for everybody to see? Does anyone have any concerns?
You might want to make it a little bit bigger so they can actually see the clear the titles of the line items.
Okay, is that better? Okay, I'm going to assume it is. So basically, again, this is the one that was in last year's financial plan. So I thought I'd just kind of run through it with everyone. So when we're talking about customers, we're talking about the number of customers for the utility, the population growth. We get this information from the University of Arizona. The Eller School puts out population forecasts, and we use those population forecasts to come up with our future year's estimate for customer counts. Volume rate, these are amounts that we're getting from, I'm getting confused already. So when we're talking about the volume, we're talking about the average that we have, and this is the price. So with the rate increase, it went to this 373, 374. The rate factor is what the change is in the rate. So this is where in the blue, we were showing the 3% increase followed by the subsequent years of a 1.75 increase. The service rate is the $13, which with the 3% went to $13.39. So these are just kind of components that are going to drive the revenues. When we're talking about the utility fee, that's the connection fee. Again, we had a 3% increase on that, and that had the 3% in the future years. The O&M, this is where we're forecasting what the future growth of the operating and maintenance expenses are for the utility. What's happened in the past, and I know this came up in some of our meetings, was we're forecasting this 3% growth in the future years. But if you look back, we've been running a 7+ % increase on our expenses. And I believe the department is actually looking at additional increases for fiscal year 27, which is going to impact our calculations in the rate workbook. The calculated flow estimate, this is not just residential. So people look at this, they're like, whoa, 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 that's not correct. The residential is closer to 6 or 7. This is a mixed between residential and commercial. So don't conflate this with just the residential rate. This is a combination of the residential and the commercial. And then that last one at the top, driver, is just any change in the CCF or the average CCF that we're using in the future. So what that information then does is it's going to drive what the revenue is, and that's the revenue that we're estimating based on the number of customers times the current rate to equal our revenue stream, right? So in addition to what we're calling a volumetric, we have the fixed admin fee, so that's the $13.74. Then we've got sanitation fees. We also get additional revenues. So we get the connection fees, that's about 15 million. Interest earnings, we are forecasting conservatively on the interest earnings, but they have been coming in pretty strong the last few years. And then we've got biogas. And I know Jackson and his team have shared with you kind of the struggles with biogas this year and the end of last year with the system being down. So there's some other revenue streams in here, but for the most part, biogas is what really drives this number. And so in fiscal year 26, this number is a lot lower than we initially had forecasted to be. So all in, this is what we consider your operating revenue. So it's the revenue from your operations plus your interest earnings on your cash balances, including your biogas. We then have your operating and maintenance costs. So your operating and maintenance costs are the costs to operate and maintain the utility, but it also includes the capital improvements that are part of the operation. So not the CIP segment, this is just operations. So as you can see, the costs have been going up, right? Even if we look at 24, the O&M was about 97 million. The budget for fiscal year 25 was 104, 105. At this time, that forecast was 103. We were expecting fiscal year 26 to be 108, and then had 3% inflators on the future years. Like I said, we're now expecting these future years to be much higher than the 110.5. You know, maybe in the high teens, depending on what comes through on the supplemental. The net revenue is just the difference between the operating revenues and the operating and maintenance expense. So this is just a math calculation. So when we're looking here, the existing debt, this is each year we issue a new tranche of debt. So we basically have what we call the existing debt. When we put this together, this is the debt we have already issued. And then at the time we're putting together the rate workbook, any future proposed debt. So if we're in the spring of fiscal year 25, when we put this together, it would be the issues we had already sold up to that time. It would not include what we sold in October of this year, right? So that's now, you know, existing debt. So we kind of have the existing debt, and then we have, well, here's what we're going to issue in the future. And that's why these numbers on that second line where it says proposed debt service, they're escalating at the same time the numbers on the above line are decreasing, because the existing debt is being paid off, but we're also issuing new debt. So we kind of have those two together. The goal is the total will stay somewhere around 62 to 65 million. So we're trying to keep, as the existing gets paid off and we have defeasance and we're issuing new debt, that we're keeping that debt service payment somewhere between 62 and 65 million. And that is, again, just going to result in this mathematical equation, which is taking the total debt service payments, taking the net revenue and the debt service payments to get our ratio. So as we've talked about, we want to keep this above 1.3. For fiscal year 25, it was 1.38. Right now for fiscal year 26, it's looking about 1.35, 1.36. And again, depending on where things go with the fiscal year 27 budget for the department, we'll know where that ratio is going to look like. So the section at the bottom, this is where we're talking about any other activity. So this is the debt service transfers for the reserve. And I know we've talked about this before. This is the 1/12 of the maximum annual debt service. We're required to put that in an outside bank account each time we issue new debt. So this is a calculation based on the forecasted new issuance. The operating transfer in from the reserve is if we pay off an existing debt that had a payment, which most of them do, unless it was a private placement, that money comes back to us. So that's what was reflected here. So you're kind of seeing the net difference between the two. Other operating transfers out, typically this is to support other departments, but there were, in the last couple of years, there was a flood control project related adjacent to the loop. And so the department needed to reimburse flood control for some of those costs. And that's why you see this number was, in the almost 3.9 million and 3.5 million. That was the reimbursement to the flood control department. But in the future, this is a much lower number because it's really some standard agreements that the department has, either reimbursing departments for reclaimed water rates after the closure of Randolph, supporting summer youth programs. There's just some native plant nurseries, some existing ongoing transfers that happen. Prepayment, this is something we've discussed several times. It's the defeasance. So when we're planning to defease some of our existing debt. And then also, and again, this is just depending on which tranche we're repaying. It'll just tell you if it's a repayment off of the 2016, 2017, 2020, 2021, whatever issue it is. This changes as the market changes. Each year we have the financial advisor. You met Kurt last month. His team will evaluate our outstanding debt and make any decisions about if we need to change what our future defeasance looks like. And it also is going to be dependent on what's going on with the operations of the department. Towards the bottom, we have the net changes in assets and liabilities. This is just changes in your balance sheet. Are your receivables higher or lower than the prior year? Are your payables higher or lower than the prior year? Those have a cash impact. And at the bottom, we're trying to get to a cash balance. So based on the current activity, when we put this together, this is where we were forecasting to end the year at 64 million. Then coming into the 50 millions for the next couple of years before it was dropping under 50 million. At the very bottom is where we have the CIP forecast, and we have the debt proceeds that we're expecting to fund the CIP. So again, the department is in the process of putting together their fiscal year 27 budget. I know Jackson stepped away. The CIP information that was provided to the CIP subcommittee last week was substantially higher than what was used in the rate workbook. So last spring, when we put the rate workbook together for your team, we were expecting, based on information from the department, that their capital program would need about 60 million in fiscal year 27. And that is no longer the case. They are now north of 100 million. So that is going to have an impact, again, based on some other changes on, our rate workbook, which is going to inform any decisions about future rates. So does anyone have any questions? Did I answer kind of what you were looking? Oh, hey, Eric, what can I help you with?
And I'm going down to the debt defeasance payments down on the lower end. I see a steady for 2016 paying off. Then there's 2017, I see nothing. 2018, I see there's a space and it goes down to 2020. Is there a reason for that, or is
Yeah.
that just, we're gonna pay off the higher interest ones, or what?
Right. We're going to pay off the ones that benefit us to pay off. So there's two things with that. 2017 is a private placement. It was placed with a bank. It wasn't sold in the public market. So it's not as advantageous for us to defease that. So really it's based on what is most advantageous to us to defease.
Okay, thank you.
And that's why we use Kurt and his team. Do you know what I mean? Is to evaluate the market, evaluate the situation, and to kind of provide us with direction on what's the most advantageous.
Thank you.
Uh-huh. Does anyone else have any questions, or, you know, if there was something else you'd like me to describe or help you understand?
I think it's really good. Here is Matt.
You know, I had one more
As well.
question, and this might
Hi,
be,
Matt.
this might be more for Jackson. But as population growth is not, you know, uniformly spread over our area, and therefore certain areas see a higher growth than some of our others. I would think that the capital improvement projects, those would be more aligned with the areas that are growing faster than the others.
Asia has a question or a comment.
You know, I have a different question, so maybe.
That's fine. Is there
addressing Eric's.
is there anything further on Eric's to discuss?
I'm not sure if Eric's was a question or he was
It was
just
like an
making a-
observation. Yeah. Is that fine, Eric? Are we good?
Yeah,
Oh, wait,
I just,
here we go.
I've been reading some reports lately that we're kind of tailing off a little bit on the influx of people into Arizona. And I was just, you know, as we go along, are we gonna see a little bit of a slowdown in the growth of our customer base?
Well, I can jump in and just show you at the point in time that we put this together, you can see that we've got the population growth decreasing. So although the population growth in fiscal year 24 was 0.92, it was 0.65 in 25, then 0.64, 0.68, 0.65, 0.60. So Eller is kind of, you know, forecasting the same as what you're indicating, that the growth is not escalating. The growth is basically stable to slightly decreasing. So we have that built in, right? Because of what I discussed, like we're taking your customer counts. This is our inflator. So we are taking into account that the population growth is not decreasing, but not increasing as quickly as it used to be.
And it's great that that's based on the Eller School of Business projections. That's as good as data, I think, as can be expected. Let's go to Asia then.
Okay, yeah, thanks. I guess my question is about what we're not seeing. Michelle mentioned this, I think maybe Jackson was out, that the CIP projections are very different that we're looking at now than what we looked at when this example, or I guess the example is what we actually looked at last year, right? And I'm wondering if like the biggest reason for that is the Saurita projects. And would we see, like when we would see that in this rate workbook, the financial side of it, and how it would affect the rates, would they be called out on different lines? Because I'm just thinking like there are population changes, right, associated with that, because now there's a new population that would be served and there would be additional revenues because of that, and, you know, with the expenses. And I'm just wondering, from Michelle, like if you see that this workbook looking different, or it would just be plugged into the
So what we
Here,
have,
take that.
what we have is it's by year. So the Sahuarita plant would come online after the end of this time period. So this is kind of the frustration, right? We have to invest many hundreds of millions of dollars in order to get those potential future customers, right? So the rate workbook is going to show the impacts of that increased CIP. So when we initially had done the rate workbook, right, we didn't have a decision on the Sahuarita plant. So then we kind of had two whammos. The first whammo was Sahuarita's not going to participate. They will potentially provide some DMA, which would give us an increase to customers at some point in the future. But the other whammo was what Jackson explained to the CIP last week, and he may want to jump in on this, was just the increase in the cost of both the treatment plant based on the estimates from Kimley Horn, and then also the interceptor. So we kind of had two things going on. One, we will not be getting any participation from Sahuarita, and two, the cost of the plant. The estimate of the plant is about 100 million more than was originally forecast. But yes, that information will show on the rate workbook once we have that information, and once we're at the point of the plant going live, versus right now, which is just building the plant and funding the construction of the plant.
Any further discussion, Asia, on that point, or from anybody else?
I guess I just have maybe you can confirm, Michelle. So it sounds like there will be like that kind of a pinch point during the years where the expenses would be happening, but we would not, the department wouldn't see any increased revenue.
Right. And so what we'll do is try to structure the debt to more closely reflect that, right? So just like you can do a home mortgage and do interest only the first few years because, hey, I just need to hang on here until I get my MBA or get my PE or fill in the blank. You can structure the public market debt to be lower principal payments at the beginning and then kind of balloon out in the future when you're expecting this increase in revenue to actually occur, right? There's obviously risk with doing that, just like there's risk with doing that in your personal life. But we'll be looking at those types of things to try to structure the debt to more closely align with what will be going on with the customers and the revenues to the extent that we can.
Well, I'll just chime in that, we had a lot of internal discussions about, and once we had that professional updated estimate of the Sarita costs, we thought we need to put that in this model because that is, we're calling it worst case scenario, depending on if inflation changes, but let's just say worst case scenario. And of course, as we move into design and working on the project itself, there will be value engineering that could bring that cost down. And then we still have not made a final decision on the size of the plant. We're still saying 8 million gallons per day type of capacity, but there may still be the ability or desire or need or interest to maybe make it 6 or 6.5 or 7 or some somewhat smaller that might also, well, of course, if it's built to a smaller size, it would drop the price somewhat. So we just thought it's appropriate to put in the full Monty the way we're seeing it right now, but things are going to happen in the next year that are going to help drive it hopefully downward. And then, as Michelle mentioned, the financing component of how we do that, they'll dovetail together and we'll have the best picture and determine are rates warranted or not, additional rates warranted or not. But we just didn't want to go like we've done in the past where, you know, we say an estimate way early before we have any real background. We're just kind of our judgment, whether it's from an experienced background or a guess, a swag or whatever it is. And then we don't change it until the day we need to change it. You know, it's like, oh, well, that 100 million isn't going to work. We need 150 million, you know, and I'm just making up a hypothetical number. And then it's like, we didn't have any time to really discuss it and look at options and maybe, you know, based on seeing what we're going to see through this financial model, it might drive us to make some different decisions or adjustments to help keep things, you know, as we've done throughout the year. But let's talk about it now. Let's get it out there now and not where it's too late. We're already, you know, the ship's left harbor. We need another big chunk of money that we didn't plan on. So I hope that makes sense.
And I'll just jump in, Jackson, just to confirm what's in my head. So part of the driver for that plant, as I understand it, is because you're taking the Green Valley plant in particular offline. So you're essentially transferring your operating costs of an older plant to a newer, more efficient plant. In the long term, the users of Green Valley will now be served by the new plant. So that's not going to be a net change except for predictable growth in Green Valley. I guess my follow-on question is, do you have a sense, particularly with Saudita maybe not paying attention or not participating, sorry, maybe they're not paying attention in the costs. Do you have a sense of growth? Are you expecting that this is going to somehow drive growth, have a fair amount of growth because the plant is there, where it wouldn't be there if the plant weren't there? I guess that's just, do you have any crystal ball on that?
Yeah, my crystal ball is foggy, as most everybody's are, especially in this day and age. But part of what helped us make that decision is that Sarita has real plans for real current development that they would love to have happen, and it can't happen without the plant. And they've already working with, you know, like, you know, water companies and stuff where they have some of the immediate near-term growth working out on the water. They just need the wastewater component. And with this plant, it will, you know, there will be higher growth, especially early on in this project. You know, of course, we're going to send Green Valley flow and ultimately Arivaca Junction flow. And, you know, of course, all of Sarita's growth outside the new revised DMA will come this way. But there are some bigger commercial activities, and Sarita is, you know, kind of like Marana has been, Sarita has a forecast of some higher growth. And I think Eric mentioned that, you know, different places have different growth rates, and not everybody's at 1% or less than 1%. And so we felt those early revenue increase in growth revenue streams, connection fees and service, of course, user fee, would help us facilitate that payment. And, you know, but Michelle indicated they won't come till the plant is built, you know, so we don't get anything, you know, next few years type thing. So, yeah, we're not able to quantify that, but common sense tells us it'll be better than what we're, you know, just the status quo.
Okay, that's thank you for answering that. Yeah, it's good to hear that there will be or there's interested parties commercially and residentially, maybe from new development, that are kind of waiting in the wings for this, that will help you with the sewer user fees to help pay this back. Although that's still crystal ball thinking, you know, as to whether 5 years from now, you know, those will materialize and how quickly with whatever the market is doing then. Eric, I think you were next to raise your hand, so go ahead and jump in.
Thank you. The wasn't there some information that Sahuarita was going to improve their current plant to handle some of the influx in the near term?
Yes, Sarita has worked on some expansion capacity there at their facility. But in a nutshell, and again, I don't like to speak for the town of Sarita because, you know, I could be off or not updated, but in general, the DMA designated management area that they want to keep and maintain, they believe will be very close to satisfying the optimum final total capacity of their facility. They're not planning on expanding their existing facility, you know, through construction. They're just planning on maximizing its throughput. You know, maybe they will put a bigger pump in or something, but it's still going to be the same footprint. And they think the DMA that they're identified will be a good maximize that capacity that they're going to continue owning and operating. And everything else where a lot of the growth is will go to this Pima County plant. And so that's how we're looking at it. But yeah, they are doing some optimization of their facility to align with what they're going to keep. But they are also suggesting or asking or discussing with us that, hey, if we judged wrong, we want to make sure we have a pipeline from our plant that ties into the new system that we can shed some flow your way. And of course, they would have to pay connection fee, you know, the capacity component and user fees. But, you know, that's as they build out that DMA, that's, you know, when we'll know if their estimates, you know, whatever are accurate or not. But there could be a relief valve, you know, at the right time put in as they get close to full capacity. And you know, of course, it makes it a little more complicated to make sure we size all of our interceptors right. You know, when and how might they put flow in, but even longer term, there was the thought that they would shut down their Sarita plant. That's further down the road, and then you'd take all their flow over to the new plant. But that's quite a few years after it gets started. So I don't even talk about that right now.
Thank you.
Claire, go ahead.
It's complicated on my phone. My computer crashed this morning. Can you believe it? It's dead, totally dead. So it seems like this is fairly standard, right? That you have to build some capacity before you have the revenue to support it. And I think about the parallels with the whole ROMP system where you had to really increase rates pretty substantially during the building phase, but then you were able to keep those rates down for a really long time during the subsequent years. And so to me, that's sort of the financial aspect that we need to be aware of is that we may need to raise rates more quickly than we had anticipated in the near term. And would you say that's correct? Can you hear me?
That sounded like a question to me. Art
It
and
wasn't
Michelle.
really. It's not really a question. It's more like, is that sort of what we're looking at?
Well, I would say right now, the reason, you know, we're waiting to see the 27 budget for O&M for the department and kind of start there. Once we have the O&M budget information, which I believe is due this Friday, you know, we'll be able to put that information into the current rate workbook, you know, see what that looks like, and kind of go from there. So we're kind of in a holding pattern right now to know for sure what the impact is going to be. But as soon as we have that information, you know, we'll make it available, you know, as we start the conversations for the financial plan for this year.
Okay.
Claire, did you have a follow-on to this topic or should we jump to Asian?
No, it's challenging to put my hand up and down on my phone.
Oh, that's fine. No problem. All right, Asia, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, this is a clarification and it may have been made, I'm sorry, but are there no customers coming, that would be new that are currently customers of Saurika? It'll just be future growth that would be served by this plant, or will there be customers coming from the Saurika system as part of this?
Yeah, I believe it's just future customers because the current customers are, of course, we have our Green Valley plant and it has some customers from Sarita, coming our way, but the Rancho Sarita facility owned and operated by the town of Sahuarita has its current customers and they will continue treating those current customers. They're all in the modified DMA that they've proposed, the transition to, so they would keep those customers. And I'm saying that as the best of my knowledge, I don't know of any that are in some strategic location that would switch our way if there was, the piping system in place and a plant in place to run it. Asia, it's always possible. And especially, if they need to shed load in the future as they get near full capacity, they don't want to go build another plant or expand that plant other than optimization efforts, as I said. And so those flows would come to us and they could be some existing customers, but that's a little further down the road. At the beginning, I don't believe it's any existing customers, just new customers, new growth.
Just as a quick follow-on for my own brain or notes, Michelle, I think you had it in there, in Asia, I think you may have information on this from your committee meeting last week, but what was the dollar amount higher projection for the Sahuarita? Did I hear 100 something? How much was that difference?
Address that because there's two components. There's the plant and the interceptor.
Right. Yep. Yeah, so overall, what's the dollar difference than what was projected last year? Either, both, all at once, either, however you want to do it.
Michelle can take a look at what's in there, but I believe, Kirsten, that it was, we had an initial $200 million capital for the facility.
Yeah.
And it went up to 260, if I'm not mistaken. And
Okay.
then we had a 40 estimate for the, the sewer line for the interceptors. And that went up to like 80, so it went up 40 million. So a 60 and a 40 million increase is 100 million
Which,
total.
That makes sense. I think, yeah, that must be the 100 that Michelle mentioned that's sticking in my mind. The follow-on is just a philosophy question. Just help me understand, because this is my first really huge project that the department is taking on with kind of some of these unknowns. Not sure how I'm asking, but what is the role of this committee and the CIP committee in helping the department decide how to phase these for some of these unknowns and make the best financial decisions? How can we best help you, if at all?
Well, I'm not going to get into subcommittee committee in general.
Right.
The heavy emphasis is on the financial wherewithal of this organization. And so, we plan our life, it's pretty consistent. We're a mature, stable utility that has fairly consistent costs other than the impacts in general of inflation. But our capital has been fairly consistent, but slowly creeping up, but also related to inflation. But now, like you said, we now have on the horizon a blip in that consistency, some bigger expense that's going to be noticeable. It's going to leave a mark. And so, as we have these various, subcommittee and committee conversations, it's our plan. How are we going to approach it, and when and how much are rates and what options do we have with any wiggle room? And all of you, 13 members on this committee have different backgrounds and experiences and perspectives and so, you know, the goal is to get the committee to, you know, not approve, because you're not an authorization, but you're an agreement or endorsement that the plan we ultimately settle on is the right or best plan. And the reason that's important is because you're all, for the most part, most of you are representing a Board of Supervisors, and it's just another avenue to help ensure, or at least hope for support endorsement from the board, who is the authority that has to say, yep, you're going to get this amount of money and here's your timing and these rates have to do that. Because if not, you know, we're in a world of hurt, and then it's like, okay, well, are we going to have a moratorium and not grow somewhere? You know, I mean, what are we going to do? And so just your engagement in the process of us sorting through this, like, this is kind of like a aha moment. Hey, we thought we had pretty reasonable estimates. You know, we put out earlier, we've been doing better and better over years trying to do those estimates. And once we got this one back from the professionals, we're still kind of shell shocked that it's that much higher. And so what we're going to have to look is, you know, what's that really going to cause or force rates to do? And what do we think the political picture is going to be? And what do you guys from all your diverse backgrounds think about that? Because, okay, well, we could just build a smaller plant, let's say, and just squeak by and save some money. But then very quickly after we demobilize the construction, we're going to mobilize a new construction because, you know, we'll be so close. But those are all real options and real things to discuss. You know, I mean, there are many ways to manage the costs. You know, in the end, if this is something we're going to do, it's how do we get there? And there are different paths and different timings and sequences. And some of them may not be by our, you know, I mean, we might all agree, hey, this is the best way. Let's get it done and we're ready and we spend it. You know, the longer you wait, the more it's going to cost from inflation and always being in some mode of construction if you spread it out in smaller bits. But for financial reasons and political reasons, that we may not want to do it the most optimum way. And so part of it is you're all talking with your respective board members that you interact with, and then your own personal backgrounds to share with us. So pay attention. We're in this critical, interesting, just like RUMP was a real critical, interesting period of our time. This is a mini RUMP, and it has the same ramifications. So be engaged and contribute opinions and thoughts and suggestions, and have candid, open discussion, because we're not all going to agree. But in the end, we're looking for the committee and subcommittee's endorsement and support to help get the board to understand and also support, because otherwise, why are we going to do something that the board isn't going to support in the end? You know, then it's like, well, we did all this time and effort and discussion and arguments, and now we got to go back to the drawing board. So that's what this committee is, a conduit, a liaison with the board that can help us make sure we're charting the right direction with, you know, the things that we're being tasked or requested to do. Hope that answers your question.
No, I think it does. I think the word endorsement is a good reminder. You know, we're not approvers, but we give, you know, advice a little bit here or there from our diverse backgrounds. I appreciate that. And, you know, exactly as you say, you know, do you do the most efficient all at once with the plant, or do you maybe make 2 treatment trains with a plant that has future expansion capability? I know you guys are thinking about that. Your value engineers will be thinking about that. So, but I think that's good for us as a financial subcommittee and our counterparts over on the CIP with Asia to keep in mind. But many of us are new, and this is newer for you guys since ROMP. Haven't done one quite this big since ROMP. And there's, I think, a lot of us that are newer since then. Asia, why don't you go for it?
Thanks, Kirsten. I was just kind of, you know, I was thinking about the question that Eric had, and you know, I'm the AZ Water related appointee to the committee. So I really see my job as looking at those things that Jackson was talking about, and you were talking about, Kirsten, about the infrastructure and making good decisions about how whatever's decided will be the best and the most efficient. And I think that there are folks, though, right, that are talking to board members and I do think that idea of what we're spending to increase and improve the service levels for existing customers versus what's being spent on new areas and growth is probably something that is of interest to the board, and in the community generally, right? And I think that there are ways that, that maybe that could be teased out differently. I did want to, but I don't know what they are. I don't have any good recommendations. I was just thinking this is a big one, like you said, Kirsten, and maybe, I can see from what Michelle was, we all can see there are really, there's a lot of thought that goes into how the debt will be managed. All of these things seem to be, the county and the department seem on track in terms of knowing the best, their options there and how to optimize. And yeah, I'm just wondering, in the CIP group, to comment a little bit more on Eric's question, there are a significant number of CIP projects that are those like major repair, keeping service levels the same or improving them for existing customers. And yeah, I'm just wondering, Jackson, if you along the lines of what you were just saying about being successful and bringing something to the board that you're recommending, if you have any thoughts about what the the rate workbook shows, what the committee is looking at, and how we're able to talk about it with our existing documents.
Yeah, I think we just now have shared, the new changes in the capital dollars, the Sarita changes. And so that's the anomaly that's out there. And I still personally haven't studied the rate workbook that, Michelle's, I think it's the one that's up there, but I haven't even personally looked at it before this. I just wanted to see what that shows from a rate perspective. So we can start, we have Kimley Horn on staff as a program manager, and we're going to make them look at some things, but I just kind of want to see how big a magnitude that, what did that do to us? So we can start looking at the various options, like just, splitting the, hold on real quick. Hey, Frankie, I'll call you right back. Thanks. Instead of building one big plant, we'll build it in two phases instead of one phase type thing, all those things. And, plus, technology, some components of technology are, really in this time of our careers has been really blossoming. It seems like the wastewater industry was fairly stagnant on technology. That was pretty basic, and I don't mean that completely, but, a lot of the same type things being built over and over, limited types of processes. But now we're seeing a lot of new cutting edge, hopefully not bleeding edge, but cutting edge type stuff that has some additional inherent efficiencies and savings. So all those things we're going to put on this big old spreadsheet and look at all these options and say, hey, we're not going to be in this, it's not as bad as it looks, because we went to what we think is the worst case. And now here we're cutting it back, and here's some new twists that we can add. And maybe in the end, it won't require any additional, there could be more rate increases, but not beyond what we've already, not significant beyond what we said. Maybe they're going to be smaller continued increases. But, I think we're all worried about seeing a 10% increase request or something, and probably wouldn't be very politically favorable and that type thing. So what can we do, and what's everybody's ideas? And, I'm not prepared to get into great detail to discuss them. I just know that's where we're headed based on this worst case scenario that we've been covered early in the process to give us time to evaluate and take a close look at it. And this committee is going to be going through that painful process, I'm sorry, did I say painful? Amenable process.
Just to piggyback on kind of Asia's thinking, and you touched on it too, Jackson, kind of what Asia I think is teasing out a little bit is, the effect of the cost of service on those who are not served in this area by this regional plant. So the rest of the city that go to your already built two biggest plants versus this area, existing customers and new customers. So I think to piggyback on what Asia's talking about is eventually an analysis of financially how that is being teased out and how that's affecting, you know, the majority of your customers that are not going to this area and how it's affecting them is going to be a topic that comes up, whether it is from us and this committee, the larger RWRAC committee, or the board. Probably there will be some desire to understand that. So that's just a teaser. I think the whole thought of cost of service effects is going to become a topic with the juxtaposition of when you did your larger ROMP, you were doing your largest interceptors, you were doing your two largest treatment plants. So it was in effect nearly equitable anyway, cost of service, because almost everybody's flow were going to those areas that you were upgrading. Granted, maybe not your most remote ones to this area. They didn't get their share. So even thinking about it in terms of that, hey, those folks, you know, maybe they were paying for some of the ROMP in effect by their similar fee. There's things to be thought through here of how do you dovetail the two together? How do you separate it here for knowledge and understanding? How do you tell the story? Those are all just observations that jump in my mind.
And I'm also going to tell you too, back on RUMP, just to give you an idea, the initial original full-in cost estimate came back like 720 million. And through value engineering and various decisions, just like I'm envisioning with the Cerritos issue, it came in at 605 million was the all-in total RUMP cost, a big savings, a lot of it value engineering and, you know, looking at all these things, and it came in less than we originally had thought and we're ultimately planning for. And so, you know, that's a great thing. And we're hoping that we have the similar successes and activities. Now, to what extent, you know, my crystal ball is getting foggier and foggier in that area, but that's what we're going to work to clear up the crystal ball and make the tough decisions on what's the best way to do this, you know, big spin that we got coming, looking at us shortly.
So thank you very much, Art and Michelle, for walking us through how the rate workbook goes. Thank you for your patience as we delve into some of the significance of some of the things that you were showing, which we're obviously going to be having larger conversations about. Let me just bring us back to our agenda for the sake of time and spending all of our time in this meeting well. Is there any other discussions on the presentation that Art and Michelle specifically gave about how the rate workbook works, the job aid that was also pushed out, knowing that we do have a placeholder, you know, of eventually we may need to see, you know, how rates are being shown eventually because of the Saudita. Just that as a tickler for later. Is there any specifics on the mechanics, I guess, as they currently exist? Or shall we move on? Going once. All right, hearing none, I guess we will move on to our meeting schedule and what we would like to do for our next meeting. Jeanette, are you able to give us some advice on when we should have our next meeting, or does anybody have some? I mean, we're going to have the rate. Yeah.
Well, our
help
next,
us.
our next full RAC meeting would be in February. So we've got the one this month into the 22nd. And then in February, it's on the 26th. So if you want to meet before that, I can follow up with Jackson and Art to see their availability for the first 3 weeks of February. Get those dates and then forward to the subcommittee members as a doodle and go from there.
And I think, oh yeah, in the minutes, I think that there was the outline of when things come out. And if I'm looking at those, so the CIP budgets are due, according to the minutes, to the budget division, finance, CIP, and finance administration this week. And then on January 16th, the departments submit completed department narratives. County administrator and deputy county administrators meet with the departments January 26th through February 6th. So I guess the reason I'm reviewing that little bit is what would our business, I mean, it's kind of getting to what our future agenda items are, but does anybody have a strong opinion as to whether we should meet in the first 3 weeks of February? Are we just in a holding pattern for more information? Claire, please.
Yeah, I kind of feel like we're in a holding pattern, and there's going to be a lot of this discussion happening at the main meeting. Oh, sorry.
You're fine.
I feel like that we're going to talk a lot about this at the main meetings, and I'm not sure at this point. Maybe after our January meeting, we'll have a better feeling whether we need to meet before the following meeting. That's my
Okay.
take.
That's fine with me if we want to just pend when our next meeting would be. Yeah, when we've actually got some business. Can we discuss having a future meeting in our larger RWRAC meeting?
Of course, you can do that in your
Okay.
financial subcommittee report. You can
Okay.
say, Jeanette, look into this for before the next, and we'll do it just like I described.
Okay.
But for now,
And then
I'll
we
just put it as to be determined.
To be determined, yeah, based on when there's something for us to review or some kind of business for us to conduct. Sounds good to
Perfect.
me. Matt, you want to jump in?
Yes, thank you. First, I want to apologize for being tardy today, and maybe during that time you talked about when the rate workbook would be ready for review. Do we have an idea of when the numbers will be ready for that kind of presentation?
We did not specifically discuss that before you jumped in. It's as good a
Well, I think
question.
I tried to mention, and our first thing is the department's fiscal year 27 O&M budget, which is due on this Friday, the 16th. After that, it's kind of decisions on supplementals, because my understanding is, and Jackson can correct me if I'm wrong, but rumor has it there's potentially some significant supplementals to that O&M budget. So we kind of need that information first, because that's going to drive, fiscal year 27 and help inform. And then based on conversations that are going on with Jackson's team, as he's mentioned, on value engineering, and like, where do you really want the fiscal year 27 CIP? Right now, I believe it's at 109. So is it staying at 109? If it is, I've got to be able to fund the 109, which means issuing debt, or looking at alternatives. And I know Art is working with county admin. I'm sure he's working with Jackson on all kinds of different options for that. But right now we're on hold until we can get the O&M information and get decisions on the CIP.
Yeah, so I mean, my thought is, I don't see a need for us to meet until we do have the workbook in hand.
And that would be fine. Yeah, just even looking in the minutes, it looks like it would be later. I don't know, maybe March or April. Is that kind of typical?
So if I may, what I might suggest is Jackson's gonna have a meeting with county admin as part of the budget process sometime before the week ending February 6th. So, my presumption is that there will be formative decisions made around his budget around or near that time. So, if I could suggest maybe meeting one of the last 2 weeks in February, just pending how decisions are made from county admin on Jackson's budget at that point. Because once decisions are made, then we can get to work on the rate workbook and really begin to draft what that workbook looks like, given the information that has been approved by county admin moving into the budget presentations to the Board of Supervisors. So I would say the last 2 weeks in February would probably be an ideal time to meet, depending on how quickly we can move through that rate workbook once decisions are made. And if we schedule a meeting and there's not enough information to present, then we can postpone that meeting until there is, but I would want to get something scheduled, and I think the later part of February is a good time.
Okay. Maybe what I would suggest then is let's have our larger RWRAC meeting later this month, or as you get a better feel for that, help us understand, ideally, are we talking third week of February, end of February, beginning of March, that there would be something, and then that gives us several weeks to find a time. But gives you a little bit of time here in the beginning of January to look at your own crystal balls. But we can make a motion in our January meeting.
Sounds good.
All right. Well, with that then, I think we've hit the future agenda items as well as our schedule. So why don't we move on to call to the audience. If there's any audience members that have joined us, anybody else who wants to have any comments about anything that wasn't on our agenda? All right. Hearing none, can I have a motion to adjourn then?
I'll
It's like
move.
Eric. Oops.
Your
Yeah, I
turn.
think I saw Eric move. So how about a second?
I'll second Claire.
Perfect. All right. All in favor, say aye of adjourning. Aye.
Aye.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Have a good rest of your day, and we'll see you at the larger RWRAC meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Thank you.